Hi there, this is Jeanette. Today I wanted to share some bookmarks that I made using My Favorite Things Space Explorer die set and stamp set. I also stamped an older sentiment on the back of one of the bookmarks. I'll try to find a link for that for you. So you can see the two of them that I made. For my boys, I like to give them little bookmarks and little things sort of they can take to school as little, good luck little wishes for them during the exam period. They really appreciate getting them every year. It's sort of a tradition now. So I'm going to take you through how I created the sort of galaxy background for the little space explorers and also how I colored them. So what I did is I took these fishtail dies from My Favorite Things and I cut out two of them using Strathmore Bristol paper, which is really amazing if you want to do any ink blending or watercoloring. And I'm just sort of dabbing on some of this scattered straw. Is it scattered straw or squeezed lemonade? Squeezed lemonade. And then I put some of this Mermaid Lagoon. You can see I was getting my finger marks all over it. So I have a little piece of paper here to hold my bookmark down as I'm applying the color, so I don't get any of those finger marks on it. Now I'm going to be applying this Seedless Preserves, and you can see the way that I'm applying the colors is not even at all, and this is on purpose. I really want it to have that galaxy look, that space look, so I'm sort of almost blotching the color on and then blending it slightly and leaving some areas that are still sort of uncolored, or rather they have more of the yellow coming up from underneath it. Then I put on some of this black soot, and you can see this is really the result that you want. You want to get this sort of dark blended look on the edges, and then as it moves in towards the middle, you have that sort of swirly, nebulous sort of look. So then I took some water on a paintbrush and I just tapped it all over the bookmark, left it there for a couple of seconds, and then I just took an old rag and I blotted the water off, and you can see we have all the beautiful sort of stars and constellation marks all over the paper. So I did that for both of the bookmarks. And now I'm going to be coloring the little space explorers. And as always, I have the numbers of the Copic markers that I use listed. And usually they're in the order that I use them as well. So I'm just blending out the face here, trying to make sure that I'm leaving that middle portion uncolored until the very end. Decide to put a little bit of cheek color in there as well. Moving on to the hair, I just added one layer of the E50, and now I'm going to let that dry while I work on the spacesuit itself. So I really wanted to have a very pronounced shadow at the edges of the helmet here, and then really fade to white in the middle. So it's a very different way of coloring than I usually do. I'm using very light strokes, a light touch on the markers, and really trying to leave the definition for just the very edges. You can see I'm putting in that color again with the darker marker. Got the C5 out now, and really darkening up that edge while really trying to make the rest of the image as white as possible. So I don't want to carry the colors too far into the helmet or onto the spacesuit. I hope I'm making sense with what I'm saying, but I think you can see as I'm coloring how I'm really concentrating that color at the edges and then blending it right on the edges so that the color doesn't transfer all the way over and make the suit look really dark gray. I really want it to look sort of metallic. I guess that's the look I was going for. So when my hair was more dry, I went in with a darker color and just added some hair strokes there, and then I'm going to let that dry as well. The reason I let it dry is so that when I put the next color down, it doesn't blend. So you actually get the sort of strands of hair drawn on and it looks a little more realistic. So I'm using some darker grays for the, I guess it's the trim of the spacesuit. And I'm just keep going back in with my darker color in the shadows. I'm going to color some of these little like buttons and bands with red just to add a little bit of color. Otherwise it's going to be a little bit boring. So added some red there, and I had a little trouble with bleeding. So you'll see me go in a couple of times with that colorless blender to push the color back in. Then I did go back in on the hair and add a few more strands there to darken it up. I ended up stamping these 2 planets, or 1 planet 2 times, and I'll be coloring those. I'm afraid that a few times I did go out of frame, sorry about that. So I wanted to sort of color the planets in like sort of like almost like a rainbow sort of theme. So you can see I'm just sort of blending the colors, and they do blend quite nicely together. I'll have a list of everything I used at the end of this video, or you can go onto my blog where I list individually each component and what colors were used. So once everything was all colored up, I did take my dies, line them up on the paper, and I always add a piece of post-it tape, or you can use washi tape, just to keep everything from shifting around when you're running it through the big shot. I also have a magnetic plate, you can see that underneath, and that also helps keep everything sort of in place. I decided I wanted some sort of shimmery stars, so these stars are in the die set, so I just cut them out using some gold foil paper. And then I did cut out, for one of the bookmarks, I decided I wanted to stamp a sentiment on the back, so I did cut out, using a larger fishtail die, some black cardstock. So now you can see how all the components are going to go together. I'm going to start adhering everything nicely. I'm using sort of a combination of adhesives, so I have this tape runner, and that's going to hold the back portion of the bookmark to the front portion. And then for all the little small components, the planets and the little space explorer, I'm going to use my Zig Glue Pen. It works really well at adhering small components to things. It's very easy to use because it has that precision tip, and the blue does dry to a clear finish that you don't see. So I decided I wanted to sort of put one of those sort of lifelines. I'm not even sure what they're called, but you know, if the astronauts are floating away from their spacecraft or rocket or whatever they're on, they're always sort of attached by that long hose. So I took some wire and I sort of glued it down behind the explorer, and then sort of going off the bookmark, and then I'll just trim that down. And I'll just play with it a little bit so it looks the way I want it to look. Then I will put down the sentiment here, so just using my anti-static tool and some Versamark, stamping this really nice sentiment. I think it's a great sentiment, a great sort of inspirational thought for not just young kids, but for everybody. It's nice to remind yourself. I think you're never too old to have dreams. So I'll just take that off to the side and heat it up with my heat tool, and then just wipe away any of that excess powder. Now what I did do for both bookmarks is I took some laminating pouches, and I just had some excess from another project, sort of trimmed it down and ran it through my laminator so that the bookmark will end up being nice and durable and last a little bit longer. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me create this bookmark, and a full list of supplies and links can be found below this video on YouTube or on my blog.